What the heck is it called?
Register of Deeds.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that is such a strange title because that's
Used to be registrar.
only a portion of what they do, isn't it? Eric, that's only a portion of what they do, really.
Well, I think it's an awful lot, though. It's the recording of whatever instruments, people want to put on the public record. The sheriff sales, which are the mortgage foreclosures, are, something they watch over, but that, again, is mainly a recording function. Let's just say I'm happy to be county treasurer and chair the land bank rather than that.
Okay. Now, one of the things that came up, and I think surprised a lot of people, but also surprised a couple reporters who went and checked taxes, but didn't check the listing of ownership. And I think they might have believed those two databases were synced, and they aren't.
Yeah, there's some challenges that you just can't fix, and this is one of them. We certainly run into it from time to time. So local units of government, the city of Lansing does current tax collection, and the ownership records that happen on an annual cycle are turned over to the county treasurer. And we then take on the collection process and get this delinquent tax roll. But the two databases, our database isn't updated frequently. It might get updated more than once a year, twice a year, not very often. And the data on the tax payments that are actually made on the City of Lansing site, those are never updated because it all comes over to the county side. So this isn't the first time a reporter or somebody else looking up information has had either, old database, old records, which are sometimes our responsibility, or if they go to the City of Lansing on delinquent taxes, those just aren't updated. They're a reflection of what happened when the city turned them over.
That makes it very complicated. I think about teaching my journalism students. Eric's been kind enough to come over and talk to my classes, and they're doing public affairs reporting, and you come over and met some of those students. And they get lost in those systems, and even seasoned reporters do.
Well, at some level, we're still blessed as human beings with knowledge is power, and and a computer can't always figure it out, so you have to have people with some experience.
So you have to be able to get through. Just recently, I was trying to get through to the to find out where records. Well, I can tell you what it is. John Herman, the author, we wanted to find out if he ever had an estate in Lansing. Will was filed.
Oh yeah.
But you can't get through on phones to anybody anymore, Eric. It's really hard.
Oh yeah, it is terrible.
And I mean, I was perfectly willing and able to drive somewhere, and I thought it would be probate court. Did keep those records, but this record goes back to 1950 something. Mm-hmm. So I thought it might have been moved. I wanted to check before I went somewhere, but I fortunately went to the right place and got the information. But it's hard to get through on phones now. It really is very difficult.
That putting a human on a telephone is not very common anymore. I always used to urge police chiefs, try to call your own department and get some information. Don't tell them who you are, and see how long it takes you to land at the right desk.
That's funny. I took office, January 1st of 2001. This is my 15th year now as county treasurer. But the first thing I did that day was turned off the automatic voice answering service.
Did you really?
Now it's crept back in with a new phone service a little bit, but we've got folks, a couple of them, that are there to answer the phone. The taxpayers deserve, I think, to have that human touch.
In a lot of cases like mine, it was a simple answer. Mm-hmm. I wasn't trying to be. I didn't want them to go get the information for me.
Right.
I just wanted to know I was going to the right place.
Yeah.
Where is it? Verify where it is.
Because if I drive all the way there and I've got the wrong place.
I want to make sure I didn't have to go to Mason to get it. Who knew? Sometimes you can't tell. What
frustrates me is so many websites have absolutely no telephone numbers on them anymore. I mean, that's it. You just can't call, so you're never going to get the number. One of the classic ones was early on the internet. I went to the Sprint site when it was first put up. Sprint telephone did not have its telephone number on this website. There was not a single. You couldn't call Sprint telephone. It seemed to me if you're in the business of selling telephone service, you might want to support a little telephone service.
Eric, what's going on in the whole mortgage business right now as regards to where we're at and people at risk?
Well, as I've talked about before, there's two worlds. There's the mortgage foreclosure process and the tax foreclosure process. Mortgage foreclosures have gotten much better. This is one of the things that the Register of Deeds office records is mortgage foreclosures. Those numbers are going down, still a little bit elevated over what they were, a decade ago, but in much better shape. A lot of the bad mortgage instruments went away. Tax foreclosure, unfortunately, the thing that I'm most, intimate with, has stayed at an elevated level. In 2000 and 2009, those levels of foreclosure went up to about 250 properties in the county, and that's where they remain to this day, and that's where they're going to continue to be for a couple more years. So we continue to do a lot of outreach. We had our show cause hearing last Thursday, had 65 or so people in the office trying to save their property, where most people got some extra time, try to make sure they understand what the process does to them, because it's a cruel, costly process. But we try to make that as as pain-free as we possibly can to somebody that's economically struggling.
And there's no discretion in the system. You can't forgive any part of the...
Well, there is some new legislation that was signed into law at the end of the year that gives some leeway to lower the interest rates. It's a challenge to think about how you would implement that across the board. Ingham County, fortunately, find wood and knock on it. We're not Flint, we're not Detroit, so we don't have anywhere near the level of challenges that those sister communities have. But people, it really ends up being a priority, issue. They've got to understand, and that's why I really loved all the people that came in. It made for a real long day, but it's great to see people, face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and talk about, what's going on in your life. This is what the tax process is looking like. What else can you do, to reorder how you deal with your livelihood.
Is it possible to get a second mortgage today in the ways that you used to be able to in the past, or is one of the consequences of the financial collapse of 2008 that liquidity still isn't quite there in the real estate market?
Well, if somebody has equity, but that all too often isn't the folks that we're dealing with. If you think about the mortgage foreclosure, folks, or those properties, and then you think about the tax foreclosures. The tax foreclosures are really another step down. These are folks that often don't have mortgages. I mean, some of the folks I was talking to on Thursday, there's no mortgage. They paid, cash, or they inherited it, but they just didn't plan for taxes, and. I suppose you get a little bit hardened to this. You try to keep an open, mind about it. But you've got folks that are living in a house and they haven't paid anything in 2 or 3 years.
Ouch.
They're not paying a mortgage. They're not paying taxes, and unfortunately, you just can't live anywhere for free.
No.
Even if you're a tenant and don't own a property, you're going to have to be paying some rent.
Yeah,
And you've faced that for some time now, and I know it's been perplexing to you. How to you do have to pay taxes.
Yeah, and then there's still things like land contracts that are predatory out there that we're going to take up some new efforts on. Mohammed Abdul Jabbar, Shannon Wigan, the doctor that did the Medicare fraud, he's in jail. I've had 3 people in 3 weeks come to me with one of his bad land contracts that he's supposed to pay the taxes. And he doesn't have his folks doing that, and so there's always a creative way for somebody to be taken advantage of. That's the challenge with some of this population that we're working with. And Amber Paxton and the folks at the Financial Empowerment Center at the City of Lansing are doing some wonderful work to help them. But these are folks that have just been taken advantage of and get a raw deal in our economy over and over again. And they don't know who to trust. There's almost nobody they can trust.
Yeah.
And there's the people that are trying to take it from them just come up with new ways to do it.
Eric, is there any way of correlating people that have land contracts and think that the taxes are being paid, that they could be notified that the taxes aren't being paid? Is that done?
Well,
The homeowner? I mean,
so-
sort of the homeowner.
So here's talking about the registrar's office again. Michigan is not, and I don't know how many states are. I should look that up. Michigan is not a mandatory recording state.
Yes.
So you don't have to record your ownership interest, and the predators that are using land contracts often don't record them. If there's a we find them, we send occupant notices, we go to the properties. There aren't too many people that don't figure this one out. But it isn't because we have their address on file somewhere. Government doesn't know quite as much as people would like to think. Maybe the CIA knows it. Maybe I'm going to the wrong sources.
Go to the NSA.
Why wouldn't Michigan want to be a recording state? Or I guess maybe I should ask you, don't you think Michigan should be a recording state?
I've talked around this issue enough. I'm going to have to do research and talk to my attorney and see if he can figure out what the legal history of that is. Because you really do want to know who owns property, just for health and safety.
Yeah, that would seem to me to be sort of a baseline that you would want to know.
But I have never heard any effort to try to make Michigan a mandatory recording state. Maybe there's some constitutional or legal issues from that I just don't understand. But we'll have to figure that one out and talk about it at a future meeting.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7. We're talking with Ingham County Treasurer Eric Schertzing about some of the sort of surprises that you can end up with when you're living in a home and discover that you don't really know if the taxes have been paid on it, and you might end up with that sort of snatched out from underneath you on occasion. I went to some of those open meetings that Curtis Hertel had held around the community and did a video a couple years ago, and it was still people were reeling from the crisis of 2008 and the mortgage collapse. And I think those are still echoing through the society today. We keep hearing about all of these, the good news on the horizon, but we haven't quite seen it. I think Michigan's still doing better than it had been, but we're certainly not flush yet.
Well, and there's just challenges even in the good news. I mean, as the jobs come back, they're simply not jobs paying as much.
Right.
So I think we're witnessing a long-term turnover in what it really means to be lower middle class and have the ability to own property. And unfortunately, I think that's slipping away from a whole new group of folks in our society.
When we look at some of the upscale properties that we do see people having, I mean, there are enclaves around the state of Michigan with, I think of Harbor Springs and Traverse and some places outside of Detroit, where you really do see enormously wealthy people with wealthy properties. We don't seem to have the same level of wealth here that maybe a Grand Rapids does or some of the other communities. Is that right?
No, I don't think we really ever have. Another way that shows up is we don't have a private, none of the top 50 private foundations in the state of Michigan are in this area. Jackson has it, Battle Creek has it, I think Mount Pleasant has it, but we just didn't quite hit the pay dirt at the right point in time somewhere along the way.
Yeah, we needed some nice Amway money or...
Well, obviously East Lansing and Okemos, those communities do well. DeWitt is doing well. But there's a lot of folks struggling in our community.
Well, Eric, that's always cheery news when you come in. I'm sorry that we keep asking you about the bad news. Is there good news you need to tell us before?
Well, the top dog names for the females is Bella and it's Buddy for the males.
Oh,
so
Bella
every year we like to announce the top dog names.
The top dog names.
Bella and Buddy?
Bella and Buddy, yeah.
Bella and Buddy.
Let me see. Daisy for the females is number 2, and then Max or Maxwell is the number 2 for males. So, you can still have your faithful dog by your side.
I have a new dog. His name is Little Lemmy. He's a Chihuahua. He's named after Lemmy of Motorhead because he has a wart on the side of his face with the hair coming out of it. Kind of looks like Lemmy.
And that dog is as crazy as it.
Absolutely. Now, do I get half price of Chihuahuas for the dog license? Because they're so small.
They can bite just like anything else. So
I see.
That's the tracking mechanism.
What do people need to do now? Because what do you do to get your dog license?
They can do it online or come into our office or call us up. The phone number is 676-7220. Would be happy to send out a dog license application. That's your dog's ticket home.
It is. And the Ingham County Animal Shelter's done a wonderful job over the years of matching up dogs to owners and getting them back into the right place. And that's a wonderful thing to do. And plus, it helps for anybody who does get bitten. You've got a whole service there in case that happens.
Absolutely.
Keep track and make sure that they all get vaccinated. That's one place where the anti-vaxxers haven't won.
That's right. We're pushing away on that all the time.
Nobody wants
Vaccinate
rabies.
our dogs, but